Morning, everyone. Thanks so much for giving us a little bit of your time today. My name is Mike Potier. My company is Boardwalk Properties. I've been licensed in real estate since 1972, and I've been marketing REO since 1979. I'll be sharing this presentation today with two other local listing brokers, Caroline Gim with Expert Realty, she just waved, and David Jervis with Coldwell Banker. And a little more than 10 years ago, we were blessed with landing this account through BLB Resources, who represent HUD in the entire state of California. In my opinion, selling HUD Homes is probably the best investment of your time in all of real estate. It really is. We're hoping and praying that you'll get comfortable with this process and sell a lot of property with us. There's inventory, as you know, is very low right now. Many of you will be asking how you can become local listing brokers and actually receive these listings yourselves. Right now, BLB Resources is not bringing on new brokers. There's just not enough inventory to support bringing on more inventory. There's not even enough for the brokers they have currently. But we'll show you where to look for that periodically if you want to check back on the BLB Resources site. So probably the best way to prepare for that, though, is to have a track record, have actually sold some properties, have advertised some properties, have videos done, marketing material, and we'll show you how to do that in this presentation as well. Right now, we'd ask you if you have questions as we go along, please put those in the chat box. There's a real good chance that one of the three of us is going to answer your questions specifically. But if not, we'll have a period. We should have a period at the end available for opening mics and actually dealing with live questions. Okay, so let's begin. Here's an overview of what we're going to be discussing today. Who can buy and sell HUD homes, some of the benefits, your NAID and broker registration, how to bid and submit offers, e-signatures are now accepted, and advertising HUD homes. So what is a HUD home? It's an FHA insured mortgage that's gone into default. The lender actually does the foreclosing. They acquire the property, they make it vacant, then they submit their FHA insurance claim, and then after that's done, they convey ownership to HUD. HUD then sells the property through their asset manager in California throughout the entire state. That happens to be BLB Resources. A HUD home can be single family, townhome, condo, or other residences up to 4 units. So 1 to 4 units is the FHA arena. Who can buy a HUD home? Virtually anybody. Individuals, investors, HUD approved nonprofits, government entities. Buyers can secure a loan or pay cash. Okay, so that's important to remember. You're used to structuring offers where you think if you show cash, you're going to get some preferential treatment by the seller. Not so with HUD homes, okay? HUD is only concerned with one thing, highest net cash in their pocket, regardless of financing or all cash. It doesn't matter to HUD. But if you are going to get financing, we do ask for a pre-qual letter and or proof of cash prior to submitting your bid. There is a priority bidding period for owner occupants. That's real good news, especially in today's low inventory market. Some of the benefits of buying HUD homes. HUD's pre-agreed to pay up to 3% of your buyer's closing costs for owner occupants only. That's got to be in your contract. And David will actually walk you through a contract in his portion. He'll show you where that information would go, okay? If it's a condo or townhome, project approval is not required. That is huge. And I know most of you weren't aware of that because when we get a condo listing a HUD home in a complex, we get calls all the time from agents asking if the complex is FHA approved. If we're offering FHA financing, whether the complex is approved or not is irrelevant. Doesn't matter if there's, say, 80% tenant occupancy ratio. Doesn't matter if there's litigation going on in the complex. Doesn't matter if the HOA delinquency rate is huge. None of that matters. Since HUD owns that unit, they can certainly waive their own requirement, and they do. The IE finance types have the option of doing an FHA standard loan with what's referred to as escrow repair. Since HUD sells these properties strictly as is, they don't do really any work at all to the properties to speak of. There's usually some flaws, some lender required repairs that need to be done to make the lender happy to be able to fund that loan. The IE is a great workaround. We'll talk more about that in just a little bit. There is an owner-occupant priority bidding period. And there's real low earnest money deposits. In our market, it's going to be $2,000 usually. In fact, if you try to impress us with a $20,000 EMD, we've got to send you back to the bank and swap that off for $2,000. We'll talk more about that in just a little bit. There's a Good Neighbor Next Door program in certain areas for certain eligible buyers. We'll go into detail there also. All homes are listed at HUDHomestore.com nationwide. Don't go there now. David will help you find the correct site in his portion of the presentation. There's lots of lookalikes out there, and we don't want you going on the wrong site, okay? Just be patient. Another benefit is there's a real quick response time to bids, typically within 24 hours from bidding deadline. FHA 203K for owner occupant is an excellent rehab loan option, and we'll go into detail with that loan type as well. As I said, it doesn't matter to HUD how you buy these properties, whether it's conventional, VA, cash, hard money, doesn't matter. But if FHA financing is used, HUD throws in a couple of bonuses. They'll automatically do a termite inspection and pay for treatment, the active infestation, and we'll clear that. And homes built before 1978, HUD will do a lead-based paint inspection and pay for remediation up to $4,000 at no cost to the buyer. So this does not affect your buyer's net to HUD. They're freebies. And these are completely sealed bids, you guys. There's complete bid transparency. You never have to worry about some unscrupulous broker taking your bid and sharing that information with his own buyer in order to outbid you. It will not happen on HUD Homes. The integrity of the system is absolutely impeccable. None of us as local listing brokers know who the winning bidder is until the day the winning bidder is notified. Okay, who can sell a HUD home? Anybody who's licensed and registered with HUD. You'll need to register under your broker's NAID. All NAID means is name and address ID. And David will show you where you can find that information on the website, okay? So on lottery properties and Good Neighbor Next Door property, or lottery properties, the buyers are able to go direct and make their offer without the use of a broker. On all other listings, including Good Neighbor Next Door, buyers will need to be represented in their bid on the website. We'll show you about that when we pull up the website in David's portion of the presentation. All HUD homes are available at HUDHomestore.com first. We check early in the morning because usually they come on, I don't know, sometime around 3 or 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. We don't get notified normally till later in the day to get them listed, and that's when they go in the MLS. So you'll first find the properties available at HUDHomestore.com. When they show at HUDHomestore.com, they are available for bidding. Since there's an owner-occupant priority bidding period, we have to define what is an owner-occupant. It's a buyer who's purchasing the property as their primary residence, and they agree to live there for at least 12 months after close of escrow, and has not purchased a HUD home as an owner-occupant in the past 24 months. It's a big red caution sign. I want you guys to really pay attention here. Falsifying information regarding owner-occ status is a felony. It's punishable by a fine not to exceed $250,000 and or prison of not more than 2 years. And all of us, buyers, LLBs, selling brokers, can all be investigated by HUD. Just do good, clean business, you guys. believe it or not, some investors today will look you in the eye because they know the rules as well as you do. They'll tell you they're going to move into this property. If it doesn't make sense to you, please don't let it happen. Okay? It's just not worth it. Okay, we're going to go through the process right now. Prior to listing, the field service managers, the FSM, inspects the property and they ensure the property is ready to list. Now, these are not cream puffs. Many of you have seen HUD homes. They're far from model home quality. These things are normally pretty well beat up. All the FSM does is smooth out some of the rough spots. They might mark some trip hazards. They make some notes, and David will show you where to look up the property condition reports and other disclosures. We want your buyer fully informed as to the condition, but please understand, what you see is what you get. If the appraiser comes up with other work items later, those are going to have to be dealt with separately or specially. HUD will not do the repairs. Once the FSM has indicated the property is ready to list, BLB Resources then orders the as-is FHA appraisal. They also order at least one BPO, and they use some other form of desktop valuations to come up with a list price to hit the market at. The old days, the FHA appraisal used to be the list price. That's not true any longer, okay? In fact, your buyer, even if it's an FHA appraisal, will have to order a new FHA appraisal during the escrow period. The old FHA, the current FHA appraisal is not released. We don't see it. You're a new buyer. Your buyer cannot see it as well. So once they have that value, we list the property in the MLS. You guys show the property. You register and submit your bid electronically. That process takes about 3 minutes, maybe. It is very efficient. At bid deadline, the next day, bids are opened and the successful bidder is notified. We're now on e-signatures, and I'm not going to go into detail about the e-signature process. We will walk you through every step of the way once you've been notified of your bid acceptance, okay? EMD requirements, and Caroline will go into a little bit more detail on this. Just right now, know that in our market, it's going to be $2,000. Any purchase price of $250,000 or higher, EMD is $2,000. So from here forward, it's pretty much what you're used to. Get your buyer qualified, get utilities, arrange to get utilities turned on, and Caroline will go into that more detail. We want you to have a full physical inspection. We don't want your buyer surprised. Title gets transferred to the new owner. One of the unique differences on HUD homes is the buyer's responsible for rekeying. We cannot give out keys at close of escrow. These are master keyed properties, and it's just too risky allowing your buyer to be at risk of somebody else gaining access to your property. So you've got to put maybe even give it to the buyer as a gift. Get those keys, get those doorknobs all changed out at close of escrow, okay? And at that time is when we will remove our signage and our lock boxes as well. Okay, HUD's got some requirements in terms of closing within certain timeframes, 30, 45, or 60 days. 30 days for investor, regardless of finance type. 30 days for cash or hard money, regardless of buyer type. 45 days for owner occupants using 203B and 203B with a repair escrow or conventional, and 60 days for 203K or other rehab financing. If it's transaction's not going to close within 5 days of your scheduled date, please get a request for extension with funds down to BLB, and Caroline will go into more detail about how to do that. They're usually pretty good about that. Especially if something falls outside of your buyer's control or the onus is on the seller, that delay of the extension will be granted. These are real easy to show you guys. They're all vacant. We have super lock boxes on each and every one of them. If you ever find a key missing, please call us. We'll get a key run out to you right away. We don't want anything interfering with the showing of that property. The old golden feather days, pre 10 years ago, we used to give HUD keys to our investors and let them go and look at properties at their will. You cannot do that anymore. You must be present with your buyer, okay? And today in this COVID environment, all showings are subject to the state's COVID-19 orders, recommendations, guidance, MLS board guidelines, etc. So we've got to get a PED in our, normally all of us are complying with this new method, which is we have to get a signed PED before we'll release a CBS code for your showing, okay? This is still in effect today. You've heard different finance types. I'm going to go through this. There's 4 basic finance types. It's very important. Please pay attention here. These first 2 are more owner-occupant driven. They're better quality in terms of condition. And they have a longer 15-day owner-occupant priority bidding period. The first is as good as they get. These are the cream puffs. They're insurable. They're good to go as is for 203B financing, okay? No lender required repairs were noted. The next step down is the IE. They're insurable with escrow holdback. These have relatively minor repairs needed, under $11,000 total. It's $10,000 plus 10%. So these have got some relatively minor issues. Could be missing a water heater, could be broken windows, things like that, relatively minor, under $11,000 total. This is where we see the bulk of the properties fall. These next 2 types are more investor driven, and they have a shorter 5-day owner-occupant priority bidding period. The first, the UI, the uninsurable, these properties do not qualify for 203B, and they typically have repairs, lender repairs exceeding $10,000, or they may not meet other guidelines for FHA financing. When we see a property get to around 100 years old, HUD says we're done. They classify it uninsurable. They don't want to be involved, and they just won't do the deal. Sometimes we will see properties that have excessive repairs, classified as UK. They're normally would be uninsurable, but the client, the HUD, has agreed to hang in there a while, and if your buyer will do 203K financing. The uninsurable properties, the UI, that's typically where we'll see the real problem properties, the burnouts, the structural problem properties, mold infested, things like that usually get classified as UI. Okay, an alternative to financing is the 203K. We, as local listing brokers, we love this financing type because we have less fallout. We close more deals with this financing. It's a wonderful program. It enables homeowners to finance the purchase and factor in the cost of rehab through a single mortgage, okay? It really saves the borrower time and money. There's generally 2 types. There's the traditional and there's the streamlined. The traditional have minimum requirements of $5,000 and can be used for structural repairs, or major rehab beyond $35,000 cap, which is for the streamline. There's a $35,000 cap, and no structural repairs are allowed in the streamline process, okay? Both programs require repairs to begin within 30 days and close of escrow and to be completed within 6 months. Here's a list of some of the things that can be used on the 203K financing. I'm going to let you take a look at that just for a minute. As you can see, it's an extremely versatile financing program. And I want you guys to think for a minute. Start thinking outside the box when you're thinking of properties that you're looking at for your buyer. Inventory is real low. Everybody wants 3-bedroom, 2 baths in certain neighborhoods. I encourage you to start looking at those 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom homes that wouldn't normally fall into your buyer's criteria. Because with 203K financing, you can add on, if the property is situated such on the lot, that you can extend into the backyard or side yard or something to fit the ideal home your buyer's looking for, okay? You can even add units, up to 4 units if the property is zoned correctly. The only caveat is there must be some connecting wall or even an archway from unit to unit. It is an extremely flexible program. So do you need a pre-approval letter prior to submitting your bid? Please, you've got to have a pre-approval letter. If it's a cash sale, make sure you've got proof of cash prior to submitting your bid. It's extremely important for agents to pre-qualify buyers prior to submitting your bid. Ensure the buyers have pre-approval with a reputable lender. If it's cash, please make sure you've got proof of cash. We want you to be aware of the PCR and disclosure documents that David's going to show you here in just a little while. We want your buyers to be informed, okay? You should only submit bids for your buyers that have toured the property. Make sure there is no contingencies on these. So you've got to make sure your buyers have gotten inside, all right? Yeah, you do need a pre-qual letter, and please make sure it's current within the past 30 days. Make sure it has all the relevant information, name, the amount approved for or pre-qualified for, the lender's contact information. If the buyer would like to cancel their bid for unsatisfactory inspection, they must realize that their EMD is at risk. And HUD homes are not contingent on this inspection. They should also be aware that they'll need to provide a copy of the inspection and circle any unsatisfactory items that were not previously disclosed. If those unsatisfactory items were previously disclosed, their EMD will be forfeited. That's why it's important to look at the PCR and disclosures to make sure you're informing your buyer of those faults prior to submitting your bid, okay? Agents and buyers should be made aware that repairs are not allowed prior to close of escrow. This is a little different with HUD homes than what you're used to. Even in the case of vandalism, the buyer requests a credit for damage. They should be aware these are reviewed on a case-by-case basis and are not always granted. If they are granted, it's going to be something really, really nominal, okay? So your buyer should understand that even if the condition changes during escrow, the seller will not repair those items. There are other workarounds. Please, if you see something, don't try to be a good agent and go out and have that work done yourself. You're not allowed to do that. Even if it's something like fix a broken window or strap a water heater, there's workarounds, and let us help you with that, okay? There's IE financing, there's 203K. Let us help you work around these problems rather than taking it upon yourself to try to fix the problem. We're out on these properties every week, or somebody is, taking lots of photos. And if we see a change in condition, we have got to report that to our client. So don't put your buyer at risk of potentially getting their deal canceled because you've broken the contract by going onto the property and trying to make repairs yourself. Okay, just let us know and we'll help you get it fixed. So overbidding with FHA financing continues to be an issue. We encourage buyers to submit their bid based on what they believe the appropriate market value is for the property. But please be aware that the purchase price for all finance transactions must be supported by FHA appraised value, as is value. Note that if it differs from your purchase price, the buyer is going to have to come in with a difference in cash. HUD will not renegotiate. The protocol is if your buyer cannot come up with the cash, he's free to cancel and then resubmit a bid when it comes back on market. But note that he will be competing with all other bidders at that time. There's no guarantee that he will be the winning bidder the next time around. There is a lender Q&A on the BLB resources site, and we'll show you where that's at. We encourage you to share that information with your lender. All bids are submitted at HUDHomestore.com. We'll show you how to do that in just a little bit in David's portion of the presentation. As I said earlier, there's a 15-day exclusive listing period for owner-occ buyers. The first bid accumulation period is 10 days. Then there's a bid deadline at the end of that 10th day. Bids are reviewed on day 11. If there's an acceptable bid, we go into escrow. If there's not, it comes back on the market for 5 more days, exclusively for owner occupants on a daily basis until sold. At the end of that time, it'll roll over to extended. Extended means anyone, owner occupants and investors, can submit bids, okay? So there could be an extension depending if there's a holiday or something over the weekend, but that bid count or bid day, 10-day accumulation period and 15-day total is accurate for IN and IE bid review. It's a shorter time, same thing, shorter time frame for UI, day 5, bids are accumulated, day 6, bids will be reviewed, okay? There is a chance the bid review will change over the weekend, okay? You just need to remember that if that happens, you should submit 2 bids, one for the exclusive and one for the extended bid type, listing period type, okay? This is a recap of the notes that I've just gone over. The 10-day accumulation period at the beginning of the exclusive period will be extended for up to 3 days, depending on holidays, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It's real, you don't have to remember all this because David will show you the bid deadline when he actually pulls up the website, okay? It's a lot of information and you don't need to remember, just need to know where to look to find the bid deadline. I've discussed that. How are bids accepted? Based on HUD guidelines and highest net cash in HUD's pocket at close of escrow. An owner occupant may bid on more than one property. However, BLB resources will award only one acceptable bid. Okay, I mentioned a little bit about the lottery and Good Neighbor Next Door program. Certain properties are noted in the system as being in a lottery area of interest, and they're listed in the lottery program. In fact, David has one. He'll probably pull that up for you. Properties in designated revitalization areas also are assigned to the lottery program. Please note that only single unit residences in revitalized areas go into the lottery program. 2 to 4 units in revitalized areas do not go into the lottery program. David will probably share some insight to that in his portion of the presentation. These properties are only available for Good Neighbor Next Door, GNND participants, HUD-approved nonprofits, and government entities. So the lottery bidding process, they're sold exclusively through HUDHomestore.com. They're not found on the MLS. The offers all must be submitted at full price. There's no credit or commissions, no closing costs or commissions paid on these. So you're going to need to ask your buyer or enter into a contract with your buyer to pay you. They can pay you through escrow, a separate commission. The seller does not pay any commissions on these transactions. Your buyer should not have a problem with paying you a full commission. You should do that on the full value of the property, not a discounted price, by the way. Designated properties in revitalization areas are available at a 50% discount of the list price. If your qualified buyer is an officer, teacher, EMT, or a firefighter, please note that the properties must be located in the area or district where the GNND participant works or services. Some of the stipulations. Obviously, the buyer must meet HUD's eligibility. How it works functionally is the buyer signs a second that sits on the shelf. It's a silent second that sits there unused until the buyer fulfills their 3-year occupancy requirement. Then it disappears. Some additional requirements: neither the buyer nor the spouse may have owned any residential property during the year prior to submitting your bid on the home they intend to purchase. And neither the buyer nor his spouse may ever purchase another under the GNND sales program. It's one time and you're done. But it's a great program. HUD doesn't pay much. Your costs are going to be a little bit higher for your buyer on FHA on HUD Homes, but HUD has agreed to pay up to 3% towards the buyer's closing costs for owner occupants. HUD will pay up to 6% commission, 3% to the selling broker, 3% to the listing broker, and that's pretty much it other than recording fees. So your costs are going to be a little bit higher on HUD Homes. Only the winning bidder is notified at this time, and we find out the same time the winning bidder finds out. At this point, I'm going to share my screen with Caroline and have her jump on and begin her portion of the presentation.
All right, Mike, in order for me to share my screen, I need you to stop sharing yours, if that's okay.
Yeah, I've stopped.
Still giving me an error message.
Okay.
I think that'll work now.
You should be good.
Okay. All right. Do you play this again? Oh.
Slideshow.
Okay. On your screen, Mike, do you see the next slide on the right side of the screen?
No, I see a small version of the big one. So we're one off from.
Okay, so you see both the big and the small. Okay.
Yeah. It's fine.
How's that?
There you go. That's it right there.
Haha. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Caroline Gim. I'm a real estate broker here in Downey. And I share this responsibility with Mike and with David to share with you some of the ins and outs of selling a HUD property. So there are a lot of rules that we have to follow when we sell HUD properties. And the good thing is, you know, they always back everything up with documentation. So if you're ever curious as to where all of these rules are coming from, all the directives, you can always look up what's called a mortgagee letter. And then they break it down by the year that it's released and then the number in the series. So on your screen, you'll see Mortgagee Letter 2015-17. This is going to be the 17th letter that was released in 2015. Okay, so one of these is, just as an example, this is the year that they stopped providing the buyer with the appraisal that HUD had completed prior to listing the property. So I know Mike had already mentioned it, but it's, you know, it's actually a good thing for most buyers, because what would happen is they would order the pre-list appraisal, and the FHA appraiser goes out there, and whatever that value was, that's how exactly they would list the property. But that was also the value that any FHA buyer would be stuck at in terms of an appraisal value. So you would not be able to get another appraisal if the property were listed for, let's say, $350,000, because that's what the FHA appraisal was. That's great. They listed at $350,000. But if your buyer really wanted it and they wanted to offer $360,000, they were not able to get a loan up to $360,000, because they look at the file and they say, well, we already have an appraisal at $350,000, so you're going to pay $10,000 out of pocket. So just so you know, that's why you know, HUD decided, you know, maybe we should kind of shield these. So there is an appraisal on record, but it does not affect your buyer at all. And once we go under contract, your buyer will get a new appraisal. So if they were a conventional buyer, they'd be getting a new appraisal anyways. If they're an FHA buyer, they're going to get a new appraisal anyways as well. So that's how we come up with all of these rules. A lot of people ask, you know, hey, can I get a copy of the slideshow? The answer is always no. And the reason for that is because there are constantly changes. You know, mortgagee letter, gosh, 2020, there's a ton. There are a ton of mortgagee letters for 2020 because of all the COVID stuff. So every time they change their policies, they don't want someone to have an old slideshow and say, well, I already know all the rules. I went to a class back in 2017 or, 2014. And so if you went to a class in 2014, well, this letter would not apply. And so you'd be waiting for your appraisal. Oh, well, give me a copy of the appraisal. No, that's not a policy anymore. So better than that, what we do have for you is this. Very quickly. Commissions. Someone had asked about the commissions, and I want to make sure that you understand. On a HUD transaction, for the most part, on all the typical transactions, they're going to pay 3% commission to the listing agent, which you can't control, but the listing agent gets 3%. The buyer's agent, also known as the selling agent, gets up to 3%. So when you enter your offer, it's automatically entered as 3% is what they assume the commission will be. Two things. Number one, you can negotiate that down a little bit. And the reason why you might want to do that is because at the end of the day, HUD doesn't look at what your buyer's offering. They look at what they're getting at the end of the day. So after they pay the commissions, after they pay any closing cost credit, how much do they net? So if it's a tough market and you really want your buyers to get it, you can negotiate your commission down, but it starts at 3% and can go down as low as 0. The other thing is, there are certain commission restrictions. So number one, if you are representing the buyer, and usually with your brokerage, they say, oh, well, you can just disperse from escrow directly to you. HUD does not allow that because HUD sends a 1099 to the broker of record with that NAID. And then there are also certain buyers who will not be able to collect a commission. So if you are buying the property and you're representing yourself and you're an investor, you're not going to be able to collect commission. As an agent, you can buy a HUD property and you can collect commission. You just can't do the two at the same time. So if you have someone else representing you, I believe that works, but I'm not sure about that. But for sure, if you're representing yourself and you're buying as an investor, the good thing is at the end of the day, again, HUD looks at the net bottom line to them. So if you cut out your commission, your net to HUD is a little bit higher automatically. And then the other thing is with closing costs, Mike had mentioned this, but the closing costs on a HUD transaction are typically a little bit higher than what we're used to seeing. So HUD does not pay title fees at all. They don't pay any escrow fees. All of that is borne by the buyer. So the buyer, knowing that they have to pay the title and the escrow fees, they should ask HUD to give them a credit to use towards closing costs accordingly. So that starts at 0. And you can negotiate that up to 3%. Okay, but please talk to your lender, talk to the service providers on a HUD transaction. The buyer gets to pick title and escrow. So while the buyer is paying for those, at least then you can go with a service provider that you can recommend, maybe you have a good relationship with, and maybe you can negotiate a fair rate, considering that your client is going to be paying both sides of that transaction. So just know that on closing costs and then the commission and like typically on a HUD transaction, the only closing cost that HUD pays is, like I said, the commissions, and then they'll do the recording of the grant deed. But everything else, just assume your buyer pays that. Okay, so here we go with the commission restrictions. So HUD's no longer going to pay a sales commission to the selling broker on an investor sale if the investor is also the selling broker. Okay, so if you're representing yourself and you're an investor or a buyer, then you're not going to be able to collect the commission. But again, that affects the net to HUD, so it doesn't really harm you so much. And then this also affects if the selling agent is somehow affiliated with the buyer and the buyer is an investor type. So, if, let's say selling agent John Doe places an investor bid for XYZ company and they're also a managing member of XYZ, then the same thing, they're not going to be able to get a commission. And to be honest, it's not a big deal. I mean, yeah, it's great to collect an extra 3%, but this bumps your net to HUD. So this makes it look like a more attractive offer. And as Mike said, don't lie. Never lie to HUD. Don't ever lie to the federal government because, you can get a fine and you can get jail time. It's simply not worth it. There are other deals out there. So just play everything super clean, super safe, and then no one gets into any trouble because they will go back. There's a look back period, and then they're going to ask us as the listing agent, give us every bit of documentation you have. I've had to do this in the past myself. So, you know, they want to see every email, every correspondence going back and forth between the agents just to make sure, you know, that we were not involved with it, like we weren't colluding with anyone, and that, you know, if we were saying something to the buyer's agent, like reminding them, make sure that your buyer is, you know, intending to move in right away, that we have at least let them know that this is a requirement, okay? So on this screen, if you want to do a screenshot or you want to write down a couple things, what I would write down here is the two websites that you see on your screen, HUDHomestore.com and blbresources.com. These are going to be the two main websites that you need to know in order to sell HUD properties. So let's start with the first one, HUDHomestore.com. This is HUD's website, and it's available for everybody. So you don't have to be an agent in order to have a HUD Home Store access and to create a login and a password. Anyone can get on there. The only difference is this. When you register yourself on that website as an agent, you register yourself as a special category, and you're called a bidder. You know, if you go to an auction, someone who raises the paddle is a bidder. You would register as a bidder because your broker of record will be registered with HUD, and they'll have an NAID. Mike mentioned that. It's a name, address, ID. If your broker has an NAID and you have a real estate license that's active in that state, you can register to submit offers on HUD properties. Your clients are not able to do that, but they still can create just kind of a public, like a normal registration where they can set up searches. And if something hits their criteria, let's just say they want to know whenever something in Kern County under 400,000 hits the market. Well, they can set up that search, and anytime that something that criteria hits, they get an email early in the morning saying, you know, like there's something that meets your saved search criteria, and it'll email them. So that's kind of cool, and you can do it as well. But this way, if your clients are looking at something, you know, and they're really active online, they may be able to give you a heads up, like, hey, I like this property, it's on the market now, let's go take a look at it. HUD Home Store, like I said, is where you submit your offer. So if you're looking at a property and you see it, let's say you're driving by and you see HUD owned or, you know, HUD sale or HUD property, and you look it up on the computer. If you do not see it at HUD Home Store, does not mean that the property is not a HUD property, but that means it's not available to submit an offer. Because as soon as HUD accepts an offer, they pull the property from the website. So it's a great way to save your time. Rather than calling the listing office to try to get availability, you can just go online right away. And in fact, David is even going to show you that there's an app you can download to your phone, and it's got the, you know, your location tracker. So if you're out in front of a property, you can log on to your HUD Home Store app, and it'll literally pull up all of the information. I don't know if you're able to submit an offer on the app. I think that you could not in the past, but maybe they've updated it since. But you get all of the information that's at HUD Home Store. If there are any disclosures to be had, and there are very minimal disclosures on a HUD property, if there are any disclosures, you're going to find it at HUD Home Store as well. So the availability, submitting an offer, any disclosures, all of that shows up at HUDHomestore.com. Okay. Now the other website that I'm showing you, the BLB Resources, that's the website that belongs to the asset manager that handles California for HUD. So on that website, there's a ton of great resources, okay? And one of the resources, it's called, I think they break down by state. So it'll be like agent resources, go to California, a whole page. You'll see some videos, you'll see some PDF documents, you'll see instructions, all of that. But one of them is called a Selling Broker Handbook. And the Selling Broker Handbook is just like our presentation, but it's constantly being updated. So if you know that it's going to be updated, I would say don't even download it to your computer, just know that it's there on the website, blbresources.com. And the Selling Broker Handbook has all of the information that we are going over, plus some. They even have like frequently asked questions or things like that. And if you're selecting, let's say, a closing agent, which is the escrow and title, and your escrow and title company have not worked with HUD in a while and they need a refresher, there's even resources for them. And I believe there's even resources for lenders, like how-to guides and, you know, commonly asked questions on HUD-owned properties, okay? So BLB Resources has a lot of great resources to offer agents, including a calendar of events. So a class like this, which is fantastic because now it's, it's all online. With COVID, there are some good and some bad, but the good thing is now all of these classes are online. So you might be able to find another class that's coming up, should also be free of charge, that you can hop on next week. And then, you're going to get a slightly different point of view, but it's the same slideshow that we're all using. And if you have any specific questions, you can ask the instructor of that particular class. As long as you're in California, you should be fine, even if it's a Northern California agent providing that information. Or you can also reach out to the listing agent of record for that particular property if you have a question, okay? And then BLB Resources and HUD Home Store, they both offer a great opportunity for marketing HUD Homes to the public without having to be the listing agent of record for HUD. So that's a kind of a cool thing, and I'll go over that later in my presentation. So canceling your client's bid. So what you do need to know is that when you're selling a HUD HUD property, everything happens online until we get under contract, okay? So you submit your offer online, and then you're going to be notified. Congratulations, your offer has been accepted. If you don't receive any notification, you may not have logged in correctly, or maybe your client's offer has not been accepted, but you can log on to your account at HUDHomestore.com and check out the status of all of your bids to see what that is. Before HUD reviews the bids, if you want to make any changes to your client's bid, if, let's say you write up an offer today, but they're not going to review offers until Thursday, well, you still have some time to go in and make a quick change or two. You can just log on to your HUD Home Store account, find that particular bid, make the changes that you want, and then you're good to go. If your buyer changes their mind and they say, you know what, we don't like that house after all, or, oh, great, another offer for another property that we really wanted last week, that buyer backed out and now we've got our shot, let's just cancel the bid for this other house, that HUD owns. Well, you can also log onto your account and you can, modify, or you can just withdraw the bid altogether. Once we are under contract, though, then the cancellation is a little bit different because HUD Home Store, that property disappears. So even though it's your client whose offer was accepted, that property disappears from the website. So if you're going to formally cancel, once we're under contract, you have to go to blbresources.com and find the form. There's a cancellation request form. And you provide that. The buyer's going to sign it. I believe e-signature is fine for that as well, along with the reason for the cancellation. Now, just be aware that HUD is very generous with owner-occupants. So with owner-occupants, they're going to say, you know what, yeah, no harm, no foul. In almost every case, as long as it's within the time period, they're going to allow the buyer to retain their earnest money deposit. They'll refund it back to them. For an investor, someone who is not going to live there personally themselves for 1 year after the purchase, they're a little bit tougher. So it's very, very common where they retain the earnest money deposit for an investor because they think, well, you had to wait a little bit longer to submit the offer. You should have figured that out much sooner, that kind of thing. But regardless, cancel if you need to cancel because, you should definitely, losing $2,000 versus, getting into a money pit, that's a no-brainer as far as I'm concerned. Okay, so on the HUD Home Store website, before HUD has reviewed the offers, you can cancel your bid there. After the offer has been accepted, everything is removed from HUD Home Store, so you won't be able to go there. Download the cancellation request form from BLB Resources, and then submit that with the request to get your buyer's earnest money deposit back. Okay, backup bids. You're going to notice on the form, on the offer form that David will show you in a bit, that there is a box that you can check. Hey, if my offer is not accepted, would you like us to hold this or, contact me or notify me as a backup buyer? We say yeah, because there's no harm and there's no foul. So if you say, yes, hold me as a backup, they don't force you to buy the property after, but you will get first shot at it. So you might get a notification just one-on-one where, maybe BLB calls you and says, hey, this fell out. Would your buyer still be interested? And they don't go back on the market. These days more, what they do is because the market is so hot and there's so many offers that come in on some properties, rather than going down and asking, 30 buyers, one at a time, do you still want it? Waiting for a response. Do you still want it? Waiting for a response. They'll just put it back on the open market. But if you've checked the boxes, hold me as a backup, the agent should at least get a notification. Hey, congratulations, this offer's coming, or this property's coming back on the market. Look for it at HUD Home Store. So again, no harm, no foul. I cannot imagine a scenario where the buyer says, you know what, if I don't get this right now, I don't want it at all. We're just not in that kind of market. Okay, financing on a HUD home. Mike had mentioned that there are a lot of financing codes for FHA financing. And, the cool thing is because HUD is the entity behind the FHA insurance, that they do make a lot of exceptions for a HUD-owned property. They will allow you to do lots of FHA financing. So whether it's a property in less than perfect condition, where you can do a small repair escrow of $10,000, or if it's going to be a major rehab where you get an FHA 203K, whether it's a K or a streamline, then you can do major renovations on a house up to and beyond $35,000. But that also means that HUD doesn't care, really. At the end of the day, all they want is the highest net to HUD. And so you don't get any special consideration if your buyer is using cash financing, for example. If an FHA offer comes in like $10 higher than a cash offer, they're going to go with the FHA. And not because it's FHA, but because it's a higher net to HUD. Your buyer can use conventional financing. They can use hard money financing. They can pay cash, VA, whatever. HUD's never going to say no. The only thing that we absolutely have to stress is that the house has to be sold as is in its current condition. So the loan has to fund the way the property is right now, okay? There's no touching a darn thing on that property. If the lender says it's required, you're working with the wrong lender, okay? There are lenders out there that have renovation financing available. It might be a little bit of a pain, but HUD will cancel the sale and they will take the buyer's earnest money deposit if the buyer's just going in and just making, changes to the property, alterations, repairs, whatever, because HUD is saying no. And, oh, but it's a lender requirement is never going to be an acceptable response to that, okay? As long as you can buy the house in its current condition as is, HUD does not care what kind of financing you're using. Plus, if you're working with an investor who has cash but would prefer to do hard money financing, do it on a HUD transaction because HUD doesn't care. Can you get a copy of the appraisal? No. As I mentioned in the first part of my presentation, it's no longer available, but it's, in my opinion, it's a good thing. As is policy, I can't stress this enough, HUD's not going to make any representations or warranties about the condition of the property, and they're not going to make any repairs to the property. They're not going to even consider a request from the buyer to make changes to the property prior to close of escrow when the buyer is the actual owner. HUD will not let you touch it, okay? I cannot stress this enough. I mean, we have to do inspections on the property on a very regular basis. And right before closing, we have to go out and do a special, pre-closing inspection. And if we notice that there's any changes from the time that we went on the market to the days right before closing, we have to report it. If we do not report it, then we get in trouble because there's another party that comes in and does inspections too. And they've got the same directive. Take photos, tell us if there's any changes. And if they don't report it, and I do, then they get in trouble, and vice versa. So that's how they make sure that everyone's being very upfront and honest about it. Please do not encourage anybody to go in and make any changes, even if you think it's for the better. Hey, why are they complaining? I patched the roof. Hey, I'm complaining, or, why are they complaining? We added a toilet, or we, changed out the water heater. That's actually going to improve the property. There are a lot of issues with that. Number one is, liability. If someone gets hurt while working at the property, who are they going to sue? The other thing is, we don't know who's installing these things or who's repairing these things. What if they make a bigger mess than what we started with, right? And then number three, what happens if these changes are made to the property and then it doesn't close for any reason. You just made a donation to the government at that point because, you know, if you add a new water heater, once it's attached to the property, it becomes a part of the property. So please, everything as is. The buyer has 15 days to do a home inspection. We recommend it in every case, okay? Now, in their disclosures, HUD gives you kind of a one-page, what they call a property condition report or a PCR, and that's provided by the field services company. That should not be construed as a replacement for an actual home inspection, okay? That's just kind of HUD giving you a heads up, like, hey, we went out there and, like, you know, there's no water heater, or yeah, the plumbing system doesn't hold pressure, that kind of thing. But they're not going to investigate why. They just let you know these things. But the buyer has 15 days after everyone has signed the contract. And the reason why you're probably going to need 15 days is because at a HUD property, the utilities are turned off. So when the buyer needs to get their appraisal and their inspections done, the buyer needs to turn on the utilities for just like a 3-day period, 72 hours. To get those inspections done, then they've got to turn them back off. It's going to take some time to get those inspections ordered and also to get the utilities turned on. In order to turn on the utilities, there's a utility request form that can be found at blbresources.com that can help you with that. But HUD's not going to give permission to the buyer to turn on the utilities until we have a fully executed contract and we have the buyer's earnest money deposit in the file. If the buyer decides they don't want the property after the home inspection, totally understandable. It's not a free pass, but it is the opportunity for the buyer to back out because maybe there's something that's revealed that they can't see through the naked eye. So if they go and they're like, well, walking through, we had no idea that all the plumbing was gone from underneath the house. Okay, that's a good reason for cancellation. Or maybe they realize we're not allowed to turn on water because the system wasn't holding pressure. So, you know, what's the problem with that? Well, now we can't get an appraisal done because we can't turn on water, or we can't, you know, really do a proper home inspection. We're going to cancel. That's no problem. Know that on a HUD transaction, if you cancel, there's no prejudice with the buyer. They can bid on the house again, but they do have to wait until it's out on the open market. Okay, so the HUD's never going to renegotiate the price or the terms during the escrow period. The buyer has the freedom to cancel based on what they see or don't see, and then that's it. Once it comes back on the open market, then the buyer is free to submit another offer. Okay. Prior to close, buyers are not allowed to do the exact same thing that you would think on any property. Don't go in and do any home improvements, no repairs or landscape modifications. They're obviously not allowed to move in or change the locks. They're also not allowed to store personal property on the premises. Any of these things is considered a breach of contract, okay? And the buyer is risking HUD canceling the transaction and then taking their earnest money deposit. Not because they want to, but because they just don't want to encourage this kind of behavior. I don't know why, you know, you give people 5 rules and it's like they're always looking for the one way to get around one of the rules. HUD has a lot of rules, just learn to follow it and you will be good. Okay, our transactions are typically going to have an escrow period of 30 days, 45 days, or 60 days. And it has to do with the buyer type, whether it's an owner-occupant or an investor, and then the buyer's financing type. So a 30-day escrow is going to be the shortest one, and it's usually for all of the investors. And then if the buyer is an owner-occupant but using cash, it's going to be a 30-day close. They get 45 days if they're an owner-occupant using FHA financing, and I believe conventional financing as well, if I'm not mistaken. And then 60 days if it's an owner-occupant buyer using FHA 203K financing. If we're getting close to the closing date and we are not there yet, please request an extension in advance, okay? And play it safe. If we're on day 42 of a 45-day closing and you're like, oh, but we're getting loan docs tonight, you're running it very close, okay? That's really, really tight. You're better off getting the extension and then, you know, not having to use any of the extension fee than not doing it and then, you know, we're delayed 1 or 2 days and all of a sudden the closing agent gets a call from HUD. They say, do not record this because we're out of contract. Your lender very well would say the same thing. We're out of contract. You can't fund the loan, or we can't fund the loan. If you're going to get an extension, there's an extension request form at blbresources.com. You provide the reason for the delay, and then you're going to buy a 15-day package for the per diem, and it all depends on the purchase price. So in our market, it's $50,000 or more in almost every case. Per day, that's going to be $25. And because you buy a 15-day package, it's $375. If we don't use that entire $375, it gets prorated and sent back to the buyer at closing. So, it's really no harm, no foul, but please get it done in advance because, if we're on day like 44 of 45, HUD is not super forgiving, like, oh, okay, well, we'll just extend this for free without any paperwork. They'll at least need paperwork. They may not charge you for it, but you need to submit the paperwork. And you can call BLB Resources in advance and let them know the reason for the delay. If it's not the buyer's fault, there's a pretty good chance on the very first one, they may waive it. Okay, so if you're saying, oh, we're waiting for the HOA to deliver, the HOA documents, that's not really a buyer delay. So you just call BLB and you explain that. They'll probably need to have some kind of proof, maybe some back and forth with the escrow officer and the HOA saying, your request has been received. It takes us, 2 weeks to get this out, whatever. And then they'll know that's what the delay was for. Giving your buyer a key at closing, Mike stressed it, and I'm going to stress it again. Do not give these keys out to your buyers. Okay, on the day of closing, meet them at the property, take that photo, give them their closing gift. A really good closing gift might be some nice doorknobs and deadbolts from Home Depot, or maybe the services of a locksmith to rekey the doors that very day. Do not let your buyers be tempted, even for one day, to keep the old locks on that property. Several reasons why. Number one, we don't want the general public out there with HUD keys. Okay, that's going to open up more than one property. But even more importantly, for your client's safety, other people have that key. So they could be moving stuff back and forth, and maybe someone was not notified of the sale. They go in and they're like, oh, well, we've got a squatter here, brand new couch. This must be the squatter's. Let's throw it away. Things can happen, or someone might come in the middle of their moving back and forth where they've got a load of stuff in the house and they've gone off to their old place to go pick up things. They just go in and pick through the stuff. Who is the buyer going to get mad at? Like, we are telling you, never give your buyers that key, and don't give them the temptation to keep that key for even like 5 minutes. That's it. Just rekey it right away at closing. E-signatures, this is super cool because, gosh, if you did the HUD class 10 years ago, we'd be talking about you've got to get original wet signatures on every page. No, not anymore. Now it's all done with e-signatures, which is fantastic. It's so much more streamlined for everybody. It's great. Email. So when you are submitting the offer for your client at HUDHomestore.com, there is a space at the bottom for all of your buyer's information. And this is not like a marketing thing, like HUD's not going to market to your clients. It has nothing to do with that. So it's absolutely critical that you put in your buyer's name correctly and you spell it correctly, because that's how the grant deed will be prepared. And then secondly, make sure that the phone number and the email address that you enter for your client is correct. You have to enter it twice, in fact, because they really want to make sure that it's correct. With these e-signatures, the contract package will be sent to them directly to sign. They'll be sent to them, they'll be sent to your broker, and I think they get sent to you as well. There's something for you to sign in the package as well. So if you have the wrong email address, or you're putting down your email address because you're trying to help your clients by, shielding them from all unnecessary emails, you're not doing them any favors in that case. Make sure you put in the correct email address for your client, and double check it, please. David will show you all of these things when he shows you how to submit an offer online. Oh, here's a good thing to know. Conflict of interest. I know that there are a lot of agents that are on this webinar who are curious. At the very least, they're curious. Hey, what do I need to do to become a listing broker myself? Sounds good. Number one, there's almost no inventory right now. I think Mike mentioned that, so we're just kind of sitting here struggling. The other thing is, you should know that there's a conflict of interest for us as listing agents for HUD. We're not allowed to buy HUD properties. Okay, so if we see a good deal, we're not allowed to touch it. Not only is it restricted for us, for our family members, you know, my siblings, my parents, my kids, they're not allowed to buy a HUD property. Our employees are not allowed to buy HUD property. So, like, again, if someone gives you a book of rules, like, stop looking for the way to get around the rule, just follow it. So anyone who's affiliated with HUD as a contractor or a subcontractor, or a relative of one of these contractors or subcontractors, you are not allowed to buy a HUD property. And you have to check a box as you're submitting your offer saying that you are not. So again, it's not worth lying. This is a government contract. So if you lie, you could go to jail. You could be paying a big fat fine. So it's not fun. So after your offer is accepted, so they're only going to notify the winning bidder's agent. And when they do that, it's going to show up as like, hey, congratulations, your offer has been accepted. You can also go to your HUD Home Store website, log in, and what you see on your screen is where you can look up your accepted bids. And when you do that, there's a verified bid hyperlink on the right side that you see highlighted here. Click on that. Okay. So this is kind of a quick overview. I'm not going to go over it because it only makes sense if you actually have an offer accepted. Otherwise, I'm just getting you excited for something that you'll forget by the time your offer is accepted. But it gives you all of the things that you need to do. So, you know, the e-signature is going to speed things up tremendously, but they're still going to want to know, like, if you selected an escrow company, that escrow company and title company have to be registered with HUD. If they're not registered with HUD, you can certainly help them. Although I don't know the value of like helping someone get on with HUD and you're the experimental first transaction. HUD does not allow in-house brokerages or in-house escrows to act as escrow. So it's going to have to be a third party. But if they need to get signed up, you know, there's a checklist for all of the things that are needed. Okay, so everything that you do, please double check the accuracy. Okay, if you didn't double check the accuracy already when you submitted the offer, or even if you did, double check the accuracy of everything on the checklist of the accepted bids tab. Okay, the social security card, you know, make sure that that number is absolutely correct because one digit off could screw up the entire transaction, and you don't get an opportunity to fix it then because if this is not fully executed in a certain period of time, they just cancel it out and move on. Earnest money deposit. Okay, so this is kind of unique for HUD transactions. Within 2 business days, the buyer or the buyer's agent has to deliver in person the hard copy, not in person, you have to deliver the hard copy, the original of the earnest money deposit to the listing agent. Okay, so you can mail it. You can mail it, you can overnight it, you can hand drop, it doesn't matter. As long as we have it in our possession within 48 business hours. The only thing you do need to know is that for HUD, there's only 2 forms of earnest money deposit that HUD will accept, and it has to be certified funds. So the first is if you go to the bank and you go to the teller and you say, hey, I need a cashier's check from you. Okay, the check is going to say cashier's check on the face of it somewhere like the one on your screen. Or you can go to the post office and get a money order. Now, a money order is only good if you buy it from the post office. You cannot go to like 7-Eleven, Western Union, MoneyGram, none of that. It has to be from the post office, a postal money order, or the bank, a cashier's check from that bank. Make sure that the check is payable to the buyer's escrow company of choice. And then make sure that the amount is correct. In our market, again, it's all based on purchase price. So in our market, it's going to be $2,000. So make sure it's made out to the escrow company for $2,000, and somewhere at the bottom you have the memo line. Put the property address, put your buyer's name, put the HUD case number, whatever, just in case it gets separated from everything else. It's very easy to kind of put it back into the file. Yeah, so you got 2 business days to get it to us. And then you also submit a copy of this with the contract package when you're forwarding everything to BLB Resources. But HUD is not going to countersign the contract until the listing broker of record confirms that we have it, it's in our possession, and that it is correct, okay? And then after we have a fully executed contract, the listing agent is responsible for getting that EMD to the closing agent or the escrow agent that you guys select. Proof of funds, you know, if you're showing a house, I'm hoping everybody is being smart enough to make sure you get a pre-approval, pre-qual letter. Or, you know, if it's cash, make sure you get a bank statement that's, you know, enough to cover the purchase, obviously. When you have the contract package ready to submit, get everything updated. So, you know, if it's cash, get a bank statement that's in the last 30 days to upload. If they're going to get financing, call the lender, give the lender all the details, and then just revise that lender's letter so that it's got all the correct information. You know, make sure that the approved loan amount shows on the face of that letter. Make sure that it shows the correct property address, the purchasers and the borrowers that are going to be on there, anything else, and to make sure it's on letterhead. More contract package stuff. Okay, if your buyer is an LLC or a trust or a corporation, make sure you're including any paperwork to show that the buyer who is buying the signing the contract is authorized to do so on behalf of that LLC, corporation, or trust. The only CAR form that we are going to use is an agency disclosure form. Okay, so HUD does not need to use all the CAR disclosures. If your brokerage requires it, go ahead and fill it out. Most listing agents will cooperate and sign, but don't expect HUD to. HUD's not going to sign like 50 gazillion pages of disclosures in California. You know, we work with a lot of clients, and everyone always says California has way too many pages for their contract and their disclosures. I don't know who they're trying to protect, but at this point, everything gets hidden in the weeds, okay? The only CAR form that we use on a HUD transaction is they want the agency disclosure signed by the buyer and their agent of record so that the buyer knows who is representing them exactly. Things like the carbon monoxide, smoke detectors, water heater strapping. Now, HUD recognizes that these are requirements at point of sale in California. However, HUD's selling these properties as is. So the buyer is going to sign an acknowledgement, an addendum saying, I acknowledge that this is the law and this is a requirement. However, I'm buying this property as is, and I will be solely responsible for making sure that this property is in compliance as soon as we close escrow and definitely before I move into the home. I'm not moving into a home without a carbon monoxide detector, smoke detectors, and water heater strapping, okay? Proof of identity, sure, it does help. Because, you know, it doesn't happen very often, but occasionally it does happen where HUD, they'll pull up the buyer just to make sure they're not buying multiple properties as an owner-occupant. So they might pull up the buyer by their social security number. And if you put the wrong social security number, then they go, hey, they flag it, and they're like, what's going on? So that's why they say get a copy of or check the social security card for your client when you're submitting the offer, just to make sure that you're getting the numbers in there accurately. Anything that you can get, you know, records of, it's great for your file. HUD doesn't necessarily want it, but they want to make sure that we are, as the buyer's agent, very responsible about it and that we are being accurate in how we enter all the information. I mentioned that the FSM, which is the Field Service Management Company, they go out and they do some inspections as well. The FSM is who you go to get permission to turn on the utilities, okay? So, on the HUD Home Store, they should also have a link, but at blbresources.com, there's definitely a utility request form that you can find, and then you can even give a call to the field service company and ask them, like, hey, can we turn on the utilities? Is there anything wrong with that? Okay, so the process itself, we're going to wait until after David is done to see if you have any questions. I think that there's some questions going on the chat, so after I finish my portion, I can go and answer anything that's not already answered. Here's the best part of my presentation, advertising HUD Homes. I mentioned this. As a HUD registered agent, you are allowed to advertise HUD Homes for sale. Anyone can. Number one, it doesn't make sense if you're not registered to sell HUD properties. What are you going to do with these leads? Nothing. So make sure you get registered with HUD to sell these homes first. Next is just make sure you follow these rules. Advertise all HUD homes in a professional, ethical, and positive manner. Please, no disparaging remarks. Don't say anything that's going to make the HUD look bad or make the property look bad or make the neighbors feel bad, okay? None of that kind of stuff. When you're referring to the homes, just say HUD Homes, HUD owned, or HUD acquired. You can just say for sale. You know, you don't even need to say HUD if you don't want to. But don't use the term like bank foreclosure. HUD's not a bank. Don't use like REO. HUD doesn't like that term either. Nothing that they would see as a negative thing, okay? Make sure you're always using the Equal Housing Opportunity logo on all of your advertisements, on your signs, on your flyers, what have you. It's in the corner of your screen and very easy to find. All you need to do is Google Equal Housing Opportunity logo. You'll get a ton. If you know of anything to disclose, floodplain zones, or if the property is in an HOA, go ahead and include that on your advertisement. There's no point in getting a buyer all excited, going under contract, and then finding out 2 days before closing, oh yeah, turns out I can't get insurance because it's in a floodplain. Oh yeah, I knew that. Tell them to begin with. And so they can maybe look for other insurers or decide that they don't want to submit an offer to begin with. Whenever there are rules to follow, follow the strictest of the rules. So if the federal law is the strictest, follow it. If your local law is the strictest, follow it. Whatever the strictest is, follow that. When you're showing a HUD property, all of the properties should be on a Supra. Use the Supra. It's the best way for us to keep track of who's going into the property. As Mike mentioned, nowadays with COVID, a lot of us are requiring that a PED form be signed, and then we're going to give you the code to open that Supra lockbox. But we don't want people just going in at all hours, because we're trying to limit the traffic going into the house. We also need to be able to track the activity and see who's gone in. If you go there and the key is missing from the lockbox, please be the smart guy who calls us to let us know that the key is missing. Some of the things that you're not allowed to do, don't advertise the house for the public, to the general public before they're listed for sale to the general public. Don't use anything that's going to be kind of misrepresenting yourself or confusing the public by using HUD or FHA seals and logos in your advertisements and your websites and things like that. Never state or imply that the price of the property is anything other than what you find on the HUD website, and never give out the HUD keys. Never, never, ever, 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 ever. Can't stress it enough. Don't refer to the houses as HUD homes or as distressed or repo, foreclosed, none of that kind of stuff. Must sell. And although everyone's allowed to advertise these homes, there are certain rules, which is, you only one agent can put a sign in the yard. Only one agent can put the property in the MLS or claim it as a listing agent on Zillow. So as long as you're not lying, you're allowed to kind of do all of that kind of stuff, like, Craigslist ads, or if you have a YouTube channel or Instagram account where you just want to show a bunch of homes, you don't need to ask the permission of the listing agent. Hey, can I go out and do a little YouTube video at your house? Do it. And then never destroy or damage anyone else's advertising, even if they are breaking the rules. All you do is let us know, because we have to go out and investigate and take some photos. Where can you advertise? All over the place. I mean, God, online I think is just the easiest and most prevalent. And if you've got a great social media presence, then go for it. If you have anyone who's in it between the ages of, I think, 9 and 30, you're in good shape for them to come and help you with that. And with that, I'm going to log off. And then David, you're still muted as far as I can see, but I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that you can hop on.
Thanks, Caroline. I'm David Jervis. I'm with Caldwell Banker. I'm going to take you now actually to the HUD Home Store website so you can see a lot of what we've been talking about up until this point. So let me share a screen. All right, does everybody see the HUD Home Store, HUD.gov/HUD Homes on your screen?
Not yet, David.
Okay, how about now?
Yes, we're good.
Okay, perfect. This is the actual website for HUD. This is everything that takes place on a HUD property prior to contract. This is the starting point for it. The first things I'd like you to take a look at, I mentioned it earlier, on the top where you see my mouse, iPhone and Android, these are the links to the app that HUD has written. It mirrors the website. I'm going to actually show you what it looks like on my phone real quick. This is what the website will look like when you download it. HUDHomestore.com. This is real handy because you can do everything on here except submit offers. To submit offers on a HUD property, you will have to go to the website, which is www.hudhomestore.com. And I'll put that in the chat box real quick. When you do go to HUDHomestore.com, if you happen to Google HUD Homes for Sale, make sure that you're using the logo that IRL I just put in. There are several lookalikes in there that almost mirror the HUD Home Store site and how they look, but they are not HUD. They are just basically sites that scrape data and are collecting email addresses, phone numbers, things like that. So this is the HUD Home Store site, what you see right here. I'm going to make a quick change here real quick. And let me try one more time. Review. Okay, the first thing I'd like you to take a look at after we did this, you already looked at the iPhone and Android apps. Those are for your phone. You can download those. Those are free. The first thing that you'll have to do when considering selling HUD homes is you're going to have to register. Your broker should have a NAID number. NAID stands for Name and Address ID. This is a number that's issued by HUD to brokers. This NAID number stays with them for as long as they have the company. It will have to be renewed on an annual basis. This is not something that you as an individual agent would obtain your own NAID, but you'd register under the NAID of your broker. Once you obtain the NAID, you can talk to your manager, you can talk to the broker and find out what it is. You're going to go into the HUD Home Store site and register as a bidder. And you'll see the information here. You're going to select your NAID type, a selling listing broker. You can also check the NAID status here. If you're unsure of it, if your broker's unsure, you can plug it in right here, and I'll just put in mine right now. Wrong one, CN. Okay, it'll tell you that the NAID is active. I just put mine in for an example, and I'm not sure, can you see that on the screen right now? Anybody? Just type a yes or no.
Yes.
Okay. You can also do the same thing here. Check the broker registration. You're going to select your role. Are you an agent or are you a broker? If you are an associate broker, you check the appropriate box here, or a selling agent. So let's say you're an associate broker. The NAID number is going to go here. You'll put your own real estate license number here, the state, and the expiration date. Okay, then you'll click add. Now in this case, you'll add whatever addresses you have. If you're a one-person office or a one office company, it'll be in there. If you're like my company, all of our different branches in California are under the same NAID number. If you are part of a multi-office franchise, you're going to want to make sure that the address that you're selecting is actually the address that you work at. Those need to match when you go back through here. So I would say right now, I would select my branch at 840 Newport Center Drive, and that would be the one I would put in here, and that way it would add it automatically. You can see that it auto-populates it right there. You go down, you'll create your own username and password. It gives you your requirements there, your own security questions, and your own contact information. One of the things that we stress that you do this right away. We've had a lot of cases in the past where someone had found a HUD home, did not want to take the time to register, had gone to their office manager, got the number, logged in as an office manager, submitted the offer, got the offer accepted. When we got notification that the offer was accepted, we reached out to that person, and it came up with the office manager's name and email address, and they don't know who submitted the offer. And if you're in a large office, I think we have somewhere around 3,000 or 4,000 agents. in our office, there's no way the manager is going to know who submitted the offer on the property. So make sure that you get all this information done. You only have to do it once. If you change brokerages, you can go back into the HUD Home Store site and then modify the name that you work under. Any questions on the registration process?
Cancellation per inspections.
All right, I'm hearing somebody's had a question or somebody's unmuted with music, or is that me? Okay, if you have questions, you can just go ahead and type them in. Okay, so we know about the registration process. Let's take a look at a few things on the HUD Home Store site itself. The map that you'll see here, this is one of the search tools. We tend not to use it, but let me stay up here first real quick. One thing about HUD is they will give you a lot of information. They will tell you the bid results, for example, of what property sold for. So if you made an offer on a HUD property, you did not get the winning bid. The reason you didn't get it was you either offered too low or you asked for too much in closing costs. But HUD is kind enough to go back through and tell us what the properties did sell for. So if we take a look here, we'll go back and find the 9 most recent bids, what the net was to HUD, who bought it, the date the offer was submitted, the date that it was open, the date it was accepted, and the broker's name. So for example, if you'd had a property on Kaleo Street in Hemet and your net was lower, you made an offer for $145,000, you can see that your net would not have been enough because the 145 represents the net to HUD, sales price, less closing costs, less commissions. So this is a good thing to know and keep track of. They display the bid results for 14 days after the property has gone under contract. Going back to the home screen again, we'll touch on this just briefly. This shows what HUD Homes, what states have HUD Homes available right now. All states except Utah, Idaho, and Washington. There are no properties there for sale. What happens a lot of times, people click the Good Neighbor Next Door link. Notice that the map changed colors. So now the only place that has Good Neighbor Next Door is Puerto Rico, Tennessee, and Illinois. There's none in California or the other states. Nonprofits and government home sales, those are both a separate entity. Nonprofits have their own NAID number and they get special access. In California, we don't have any government dollar homes. We can click here and see who does. Right now, it doesn't look like anybody has any dollar homes for sale in the states. This is the actual search bar right here that you're going to utilize the most. We'll go ahead and go to California. And since there's not many properties, I'm going to go ahead and search the entire state. Right now in California, there's a total of 9 HUD properties that are actively available on the market. This is pretty much representative of the entire market. I know working right now with buyers, inventory is lower than I've seen it. I've been doing this since 1986, and I've never experienced inventory this low. HUD is no exception to the rule, just like there's really no REO to speak of on the market either. So we have a total of 9 listings available. Could that go up? We do not know. That's real hard to say. And these are going to be in all counties. Now, if we take a look at the screen, the things we're going to look at on this, notice here on the category, the listing period, extended, exclusive, exclusive, lottery. This is a one that just came up, I believe, today. Exclusive, exclusive, and lottery. Now, when I roll my mouse over the sign here where it says lottery, this tells us what kind of lottery it is, a nonprofit and government agency only. So this is not a Good Neighbor Next Door property. Going down to Hawaiian Gardens, which is the closest to us, this is a nonprofit and government agency only. This means that the property is typically going to be classified as uninsured. So for 5 days, it'll be offered on a lottery basis to those 2 entities. And then after 5 days, it's going to come up as an exclusive listing. Mike talked about extended listings. This is one that's been on the market. When you roll over, you'll see this is open to all bidders. The other key things to remember are the bid opening date, 4/7, 4/12, 4/12, 4/7, 4/9, 4/12. Keep in mind that on the bid opening date, the bidding period shuts down the night before at, midnight Central Time. So that in our case would be 10 o'clock our time. I always try to have my offers submitted no later than say 9:30 at night, only because I've had experiences where my computer crashed and everything got lost. I had to start over and I missed an offer by about 2 minutes because the shutdown on the offer system is hard and fast. If you're not completed with your offer, your system will shut down. You won't get your offer in. So try to get your offers in early so you don't have any risk of any problems like that. Okay, they'll also give you the address, the price, the status, whether it's a new listing. Sometimes there'll be bubbles here that'll tell you if it's price reduced, things like that, down arrows, up arrows. But the way you'll take a look at the information is, let's go to one right now. We'll take a look at this one I just got in Hawaiian Gardens. So when you click on the tab, you're going to find photographs of the property. You'll find the basic information, the address. What they're showing is the bedroom and bath count, the room count, the square footage, the year it was built. This they're classifying as a single family home, even though it is a duplex. You will find this from time to time where the information that's on the tax roll or on HUD's rolls does not match what the property actually is at the physical location. It'll tell you if there's an HOA, if there's any fees, if it's a revitalization zone, or if it's an opportunity zone, and the lot size. The other things to look at will be the listing date, when it came on the market, the period that it's in right now is a lottery. When does this period deadline end? This ends on 4/8, which is 2 days from now. So Wednesday, Thursday, so Friday morning, if there's no bidders from a nonprofit or government entity, then this is going to roll over to a exclusive listing. Because it's uninsurable with FHA financing due to the condition, it will be limited to owner occupants for only 5 days as opposed to 10. On an FHA insured listing, whether it's regular or 203B IE, that owner occupancy protection period extends for 15 days. And they notice here, is the property eligible for 203K financing? Yes. Okay, so let's go back again to the property search. Let's look at one that is actually available for regular financing. An exclusive listing, something that just came up, and let's see what's closest to us. Maybe Apple Valley is probably as close as we're going to get, or Hesperia. And this is a newer listing. So again, they'll have a good set of pictures on here that you can take a look at what the property looks like. Again, the address, the bedrooms and baths, total rooms, the lot size. This does have an HOA, $146 a month. This is an IE property, meaning there's about $10,000 or less in terms of minor repairs that it needs. The listing price, the period deadline. This is when the bidding for, or when it changes from exclusive to extended. So if I take a look at this, this is 4/16. Keep in mind though, when you go back and take a look at it, 4/12 is when the bid period ends. So the first bid on an exclusive listing is going to be 10 days after the property comes on the market. Okay, on the addendums tab, it's where you'll find a lot of the information that was discussed earlier. Okay, the one that you're going to want to pay closest attention to on this is going to be, let's see where it went here. I'm looking for, here we go, disclosure and PCR. A lot of times they'll combine it, so I was a little bit lost. For some reason, it's not showing up there. I'm going to go back to another property and see if I can find it so we can take a look at it. Okay, we have another relatively new one here in Hesperia. Let's see what this one looks like. Again, this one, same thing, IE insured escrow. The period deadline for this is on 13th. The offer date on this one is going to be a couple days before that. So let's take a look at addendums on this one. Okay, and I'll have to share this screen. Is that showing up yet, the listing disclosure on your screen? Mike, anybody?
Yeah, it is. It's listing disclosure and repair statement is showing right now.
Okay, perfect. Okay, this is where you tell what were the items that the appraiser called out and why is this an IE property? So when HUD had the field service company go out, they took a look at it and they did their inspection, which again, Caroline said is not a full inspection. These are the items that HUD was informed of when the field service manager took over the property from the servicer or from the foreclosing entity if it was a reverse mortgage. The cooling and air conditioning was tested, yes, and you'll see generator, generator, generator. So this means there was no power on. They plugged a generator into the system to try to test these items, and they said they worked. Was the water supply tested? No, it was missing components they could not test. Could have been a water heater. A lot of times they won't test if the water heater is missing, although it says it's here. So something they couldn't test the components and by putting pressure in the system. They did do a winterization. They put antifreeze in the drains, and the roof, they took a look at it and they said visually it's okay. Now these items though that you see here, these are the things that the appraiser, when HUD had the property appraised, this is what he came up with. Plumbing system is missing components, discoloration in the master bedroom, missing water heater straps, defective exterior paint surfaces and exposed wood. The bedroom window is loose, the door frame is damaged, light fixtures are missing. Replace missing floor tiles, water stains noted on living room ceilings. There's no carbon monoxide detector, and installed doorbell chime for exposed wires. So these are the items that their appraiser called out, and that's why they classified this as an IE property, so up to $10,000. Now, if you get this property sold, if you are making a bid on the property and your appraiser went out and did not mention all these items, then you could get some of them removed and possibly go regular 203B. But the other side of the coin is if your appraiser goes out and finds more items, then those things are going to be added to that list, and hopefully you keep it under the $10,000. If it comes out to be more than $10,000, then you'll be required to switch financing type either to a 203K rehab loan or into a conventional product that may not call for this. Again, HUD does not care what type of financing you use, as long as it is your buyer's going to close the deal. And they do not give you really any contingency if your lender says, oh, we can't close it because of these items. You know, they'll give you your money back, but they won't negotiate or, you know, readjust prices or things like that. So on this, if you want to find the Selling Broker Handbook, it's right here. You can take a look at that and see what it looks like. This is the Bible for all HUD transactions. And it's got quite a few pages. This is the revised version in 7/16/2019. And we don't have any additions to it at this point. That's something you can download and keep on your desktop if you want to look at it. Okay, on here as well, you can disregard most of this stuff. HUD puts every contract known to man in their addendums tab, even though we don't use them anymore. Okay. They will put the lead-based paint pamphlet in there. They have a Q&A. They have selling agents questions. The smoke detector, carbon monoxide detector disclosure that Caroline showed you is there. The California Selling Broker Quick Reference Guide is there. The contract package is there, even though we don't do it. This applies to the Good Neighbor Next Door program. So really none of this applies except for what we looked at before, which was the PCR and the disclosure. Okay, then going back again, you can take a look and see there's a lot of photos. The white spots on the wall are what they use to cover graffiti or writing on the wall. This looks like it might be an ideal candidate for a 203B or 203K streamline, up to $35,000 in repairs, because it doesn't look like there's anything really structural on this that couldn't be covered. So it's actually not a bad looking piece of property. Contrasted to the one in Hawaiian Gardens. I think in my next life, when I come back, I want to come back as a field service company because they get, I believe, $5 for every piece of tape that they put on the carpet or sometimes even on sprinkler heads outside. Okay, going back to property info. See if there's anything else I didn't cover. On this, you'll see what the year built was. So you would not have a lead-based paint inspection on this property due to the age. Anything built prior to 1976 on an FHA transaction only, as they mentioned, HUD will do a lead-based paint inspection. And someone asked earlier about how do we know or how can the buyer see that? And if we go back to the addendums tab really quickly, I'll pull this up, the lead-based paint disclosure. And because this is a newer property, they don't even put it in this tab. That actually, the answer to that question that you asked, Maddie, earlier was it's on the lead-based paint disclosure as part of the contract. That if the property was built prior to 76, HUD will do a lead-based paint inspection and they will remediate up to $4,000 worth of lead-based paint. If you're selling an older home and the inspection comes back and reveals more than 4,000, even $4,001, you'll be required to switch financing types at that point to FHA 203K and finance the repairs as part of your package. You will, however, get that $4,000 as a credit in escrow. It doesn't go away, it just is not paid directly to the lead-based paint inspection company. Okay, we see this is on an acre. And again, it's insured escrow, eligible for 203K. Buyer selects closing firm and agent firm. That's been something that we've had now, thank goodness, for the last 2 or 3 years. Again, the buyer does pay for all the costs associated with it. If there are any questions that anybody's had on this screen, go ahead and type them in and Mike or Caroline will go ahead and answer the questions. Okay, one of the things I do like, Caroline mentioned it as far as marketing, HUD does make it kind of easy right now to market the properties, even though we're technically not allowed to door knock at the moment. Some people are still doing it. Once that restriction is lifted and we're able to do it, HUD makes it very easy. Click on the link and you now have a flyer that's ready with room for your business card. Put it on the bottom, take it to Kinko's, make 100 copies and go knock on doors. I will tell you that in certain areas around LA County where we do a lot of business, if there's a property that comes up in a neighborhood down in Norwalk, Southgate, different areas like that, typically within 2 to 3 hours of a property coming on the HUD Home Store site, there are agents who have taken the information, gotten the flyers, and they've gone out and knocked on every door around the listing long before the sign goes up and the lockbox goes up. The thing that's good about it, when you're marketing something like this, everybody and their brother would like to find out about a HUD home or about a government-owned home because they see value or perceive value. They've spent COVID locked down watching home improvement channels, and they're all dying to find something that they can flip. So this gives you a real tool to get in contact with people and to talk to people and get a conversation going. Okay, so we'll go back and we'll take a look back to the property search. Again, because we don't have many to choose from, there's not a lot. Let me see if I can find an older home in here just to find out if we have anything with the lead-based paint inspection. Oh, we do here on this one on Ibex. Okay, here's the verbiage. If lead-based paint was identified in the report, HUD will perform stabilization if the cost estimate is $4,000 or less. Okay, so I think that would answer the question right there. And your buyer would be signing that as part of the contract package once it goes out on an accepted offer. Okay, we'll go back home on this side. Go back to the search screen again. Okay, on the question just now on can you purchase HUD home once? No, you can purchase HUD homes more than once. The only thing is on the good neighbor next door property, you cannot have gotten a good neighbor next door property before, and you cannot have owned a home in the previous 12 months. If you bought a HUD home in the past, you can buy another one. If you have gone and lived in it for more than a year, then year 2, you can buy another one. I've got a client that called me a couple of days ago. We're going to look at one of the properties coming up, and he bought a HUD home from me 3 years ago. So he's more than qualified now to buy a second one. Okay, so we'll go back again. We saw that about the lead-based paint disclosure. And again, the owner occupancy requirement is that they live in the home for 12 months after the close of escrow or after the renovations are done if they're using renovation financing. Again, the renovation financing is a real good deal for buyers because not only can they use the funds for the renovation, in certain circumstances, they can also use part of the funds to make the mortgage payment while they're doing the repairs on the property. And the interest rates are quite low, lower than what they'll get if they used a Home Depot credit card, which they'll probably get in the mail after close of escrow. Okay, so going back. Okay, let's find one that we want to take a look at and make an offer on right now. Let's go back to Hesperia. Okay, we've shown the property, we like the property, and we're going to submit an offer. Okay, you'll have to go in and log in again, selling broker. And I haven't memorized this number yet. I should have after a year, but. And your real estate license. And verify the NAID. I wonder if I got something wrong here. CBBNT B0237. That's weird. It's not letting me log in. Let me try it again.
You want my NAID?
Here, let me log in here and see if it makes a difference. There we go, we've logged in. Oh, real quick, what popped up, once you've logged in, the first screen that you get when you log in is review your bids. As they mentioned earlier in the presentation, anytime you submit an offer on a HUD property, prior to acceptance or prior to opening of the bid, you can modify the bid. So anything, if you had an offer, would show up in this screen, you could change that, reduce the price, increase the price, add closing costs, reduce closing costs, things like that. So let's go back here to home and see if we can make a bid again. Search. Okay, we'll go to, let me find one here that's extended. Let's do Santa Rosa this time and see if that makes a difference. Okay, submit a bid. Okay, good, we got through. What you should see on your screen now is the HUD bid process in its entirety. Notice the clock running here in red. This is how long you have to complete it. It should take you no more than a couple of minutes to do that at best. The first thing they ask you for is the offering price. So the price is $348,000. We'll just assume that we're going to offer that right now. Okay, people ask, what do you offer on a HUD property? The same thing you would offer on any other property that's available on the market right now. If 348,000, if you run the comps on the property and you go back and look at the pending sales for the last 30 days and they're 20,000 higher, then you want to offer accordingly. Right now, when we do our evaluations and when we are working with our clients, we don't go back any farther than 60 days in terms of what our sold comps are, because anything beyond that, really anything beyond 30 days is pretty much useless in today's market. But for the purposes of this, we'll say 348 is the offer. What type of financing? We're going to try to go for 203B repair escrow. That's the $10,000. Make a note to yourself that VA also does a repair escrow like this now. In the past, VA was very, very difficult to get through on a HUD home, but since they offered the $10,000 holdback, we're now able to offer these to veteran buyers as well. Okay, item 5 is critical. This is the closing cost box. We know that the buyer is going to have to pay for both sides of escrow, both sides of title, transfer tax, city tax if there is city tax, and any other fees other than closing cost and commission. If you're asking for the seller to pay closing cost, we know that they'll pay up to 3%, which is 10,440. Okay, so let's go for the maximum right now. So now we're looking at a 348 offer. This is the number that HUD looks at, 316,680. If you don't need 3% in closing costs, don't ask for it. Let's say you do. Let's say you do need the 10% or 3%. You might want to consider adding it to your list price. So 358.4, let's say, is our asking price or our offering price. So now we see we brought the net back up to something that's closer to what HUD is originally asking for in their contract. We'll go back to 348. And let's say you don't need closing costs. So we can put a 0 here. Let's say, however, it is a competitive market. You want to give your buyer an edge. A lot of times you're competing with entities that give buyers back, commission, things like that. You can't do that with the HUD property, at least not on the offer. But if you want to reduce your brokerage fee, you're allowed to do that. Let's say you wanted to take it to 9,440. You could do that. I like this. You can't change mine. That's a good thing. So now it's 328, 120,000. That's what HUD is looking at on the net. And even though it says in the presentation, you must have a pre-qual letter and all that kind of stuff, on the offer process itself, as I scroll down, you'll see there is absolutely no place to put that information down. There is no place to attach a love letter. There's no place to tell that your buyer has a 999 FICO score and $900 million in the bank. So again, HUD looks strictly at the net on each offer. So if you did not get it, if you did not get an offer accepted, this is the reason right here. Okay, on this property, because we have it as an extended category, this could be open to owners or to investors, either one. So if we go here with an owner occupant, we see what the fees are. This box does have to be checked, even though stated it's optional. If you don't check the may hold offer box, you won't be able to process the offer. So you check that off. This is the new conflict of interest box. This came up last year. Is the buyer any way related to HUD? Check yes or no. Check no, because people who have any business relationship with HUD aren't allowed to buy HUD properties. The selling broker, the agent submitting the bid as a purchaser, has an owner or has an ownership interest in the purchasing property. Check yes or no. In most cases, it's going to be no. HUD does not mind if you do buy the property. However, they will not pay your commission as a purchaser on the sale. The same applies if your broker is buying the property and you're representing your broker, because that's the same thing in HUD's eyes. This is all that HUD is going to ask for. They're going to ask for the name, the address, the social security number or tax ID if they're a business, an email address, and a cell phone. They put down phone number right here, but they told us to use cell phone and not just the phone number. The reason they want this information, the email and the phone, is not to contact your buyer. HUD will not do that. They'll always contact the agent that represents them. This is for the purposes of the electronic signature through DocuSign. So you can add up to, I believe, 6 different buyers at one time. You can add buyers or remove buyers during the process or prior to the contract. However, you need to have one primary borrower on here that is not changed. So if we have 3 borrowers or 3 buyers and you need to take 1 or 2 of them off, one of the originals has to stay, the primary buyer has to stay on the contract. Okay, on the closing agent, you get to pick your own escrow company. Sometimes they have different companies in here. A lot of people use title companies. Let's just see what Chicago has, for example. Chicago Title, all their different offices are listed here that they've used with. They make it kind of easy because they already have inputted the title ID numbers, the escrow officers' names, email addresses, things like that. On this one, they don't happen to for some reason. Let's just see what they have with Fidelity. Yeah, a lot of times the escrow officer's names will also be in there. If you'll need to put that information in there. One thing you'll have to do if you have an accepted bid is your escrow office, even though they may actually be in the HUD system already, you will have to get a copy of their errors and omissions, their business license, and upload that into the HUD system once your offer is accepted. What'll happen is if you have an accepted offer, you'll be getting an email, and I'll show you where you'll go in a moment. And at that time, that's where you're going to upload your proof of funds, your pre-qualification letter, the information on the escrow in terms of their license and their errors and omissions insurance. Those things will all go in. Make a note on your pre-qual letter. That letter must state the type of financing and the buyer's name and the property address. If it does not have that, HUD will kick it back. If it is going to be an FHA transaction involving a gift, you will need a gift letter signed by the donor. You'll also need a copy of the donor's bank account showing where the funds are coming from that they are gifting to the borrower. They'll also ask that your borrower provide a copy of their bank statement showing that they've got proof of funds in order to purchase the property. When you're preparing this to upload, as with any other entity, make sure that any personal identifiable information is blocked out before you upload it into the system. On the last box, make sure that the broker is in here and is correct. In this case, Anthony Papillo is the broker of my company. He is the person that will actually sign the contract via DocuSign. As an agent, you will not sign the contract. You will get a copy of it once the contract is prepared and sent out. That's for you to review and make any corrections. Once that is approved, it'll start the loop. It'll go to your buyers for signature. Then it will go to the broker, and then it will go to the escrow. Once that process is complete, then the ratified contract will be sent out directly to escrow, to the selling agent, and to the listing agent. So once you have this done, once this is filled out, you're going to click submit. You'll be getting another box pop up that says, review this information. Are you sure this is what you want to submit? You click yes. You're going to get a bid confirmation form, and then you'll have an answer back on the bid opening date, typically by about 12 or 1 o'clock. So if you've made an offer on a HUD property and 12 or 1 o'clock rolls by and you heard nothing, odds are you probably did not get the property. HUD does not go back and notify everybody that their offer was not accepted. They only notify the winning broker and the listing broker. Now, if you do get an offer accepted, what's going to happen is you're going to have to go back here and go to bidder functions. And you'll get on this tab that says accepted bids. Once you receive that email from BLB Resources and from HUD P260, it will tell you that you have an accepted offer. You'll see I have no accepted bids right now. You'll click this tab, and then you'll be popped up to a screen that will allow you to verify the information regarding to your buyer, buyer socials, things like that. They want to verify that information is all correct. You'll be able to, at that point, if you need to add or remove a buyer, you can do that. You will not be able to change the terms or the closing costs. Those things will remain the same as when you submitted the offer. Just make sure that when you're doing that, that you do have that information correct, because again, HUD does not change that ever. If, for example, you had the property and you inspected it and found that there was things wrong with it, your buyer can cancel the escrow and get their money back, and they can rebid at a different price, but they will not be able to rebid on that, on the existing. They can't change the existing offer. And that holds true for the appraisal as well. So buyers need to be aware of that. Again, HUD, I've only seen one buyer in, I think, 9 years lose their deposit, and that was under very extenuating circumstances. HUD does not make any money keeping buyers' deposits. So I think we basically covered everything on here at this point on the site. If you want to take a real quick look, after contracts are ratified, you can go to blbresources.com and go to Agent Resources. Click on that link. That is going to give you all of your contract forms and addendums down below. You can get a copy of the Seller's Broker's Handbook. You can find out other training events. These are your request forms. As Caroline mentioned, what's going to happen once you have an accepted offer, you'll be getting notification on how to request your utilities be turned on. The buyer is going to have to submit $150, a check that's going to have to be sent to the field service company. And that covers re-winterization and also any trailing bills. Sometimes they turn the water on, forget to turn it off, and then a bill adds up. So that's what that money goes for. That 150 is not refundable, by the way. You can change the financing type. You can add purchasers, remove purchasers. Your cancellation is request is here if you want to use that. You've got a lot of instructions. You can get all your samples here. Additional forms, the broker authorization letter, you'll see that with the contract if someone other than the broker signs. If there's a gift letter, you can use that one. The rest of these will be coming with the contract themselves. And then again, they have some older training videos that they have produced a couple of years ago. So this is the BLB website. They also have what they call their photo brochure. So let's say the Central Region, California. There's not much on there, but we'll click at one and see what that takes a look like. Okay, this is something that people sometimes use in marketing. Okay, so this is the BLB website. And again, this is the HUD Home Store website. And I think that pretty well covers it on this side. Does anybody have any questions that have popped up?
There's nothing open in the chat. If anybody has any questions, now is the time. Please, you can unmute yourself if you like.
Yeah, I'm going to stop my screen sharing. Oh, there is one new message. Well, thank you, Medic. Appreciate that. Let's see. Am I able to stop my share? Let's try it this way.
Do you see a horizontal bar on your screen, on either screen,
No, I
towards the
don't.
bottom?
No, I don't. That's unusual. Let me try it now.
I think you stopped sharing your screen now.
Got it now. Share screen. Whoop.
No, I think we're not looking at your screen anymore.
Okay, good.
Did it for him.
Thank you so much.
I don't see any questions. I think we're good to go. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a good week. Bye-bye.